Good evening.
Good evening.
It's always a pleasure to come out here to Post Oak. Giving us all of us students an opportunity to practice what we're learning, an opportunity to learn how to preach better according to how you all respond is so helpful to us, so I really appreciate that so much. When my wife and I were pregnant with our third child, I decided that I wanted to go back to school to get a better education so that I could provide more for my family. This is before I had decided to come to preaching school. And because I wanted to stay at home as much as possible with my children and with my wife, I decided to take courses online. The nature of online courses requires that you have a computer to work with and, of course, an internet connection. I was given a computer by my brother and his soon-to-be wife, my soon-to-be sister-in-law. But the computer I received from them, while I was very grateful, was a little dated. It had a program on it that would not work with anything that I was doing. If I wanted to get on where my classes were and to write papers and to discuss on discussion boards, I wasn't able to do it. It was useless to me in a certain sense. So what I had to do was I had to go to my local Best Buy or wherever it was I got it from, and I got an updated operating system that was able to do all these things that I needed it to do. Before I was stuck with not able to do anything, but once I got what I needed upgraded, the newer thing, I was able to complete the task that I needed to get done. With God, there is the same thing, but in a different way. For God created something. He created something for the people to have. He created something that would bring in something new. This something that He created first was a covenant. And this covenant, this law that He made with the Israelites, had one purpose in mind, and that was to bring forth a new covenant. And God has since done what He said He was going to do, and He brought forth a new and better covenant, leaving the old one behind. Now, what makes this a better covenant? Why do we need a new covenant? And how can we have a new covenant? Are very important questions. And if you would open your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 8, we're going to look at why we even need a new covenant and why it's so much better to begin with. Now, if you notice with me in Hebrews chapter 8, the first verse, the writer of Hebrews has been talking from chapter 1 all the way up to this point. And he says, now the main point in what has been said is this: we have such a high priest. He says the main point is Jesus. Jesus is the main point and the reason that we can even have a new covenant. We can even have a better covenant. Now Jesus, the first thing it says, He's the high priest. And He's seated at the right hand of God as you continue reading on in verse 1 and verse 3. Seated at the right hand of God. Now, being seated at the right hand of the Father has two pieces of imagery that I can come up with. One, after searching a little bit, was that even the pagans and the other people's gods around them, around the Israelites, they had images of their gods sitting on thrones. And one image was that of having one of their gods sitting at the right hand of another god. And anytime there was this god, let's say Baal, sitting at the right hand of his father, if he was sitting on the right hand, I mean, he had power, he had rank, he had authority. And doesn't this ring true also for Jesus as high priest? That He is seated at the right hand of the Father, having power, authority, rank as number one, as possessing everything. But also with this seated concept, you've had a hard day at work sometime, right? A day where you woke up early and the whole day long you were toiling either with your mind, with your emotions, and with your body. Maybe all three at the same time. Sometimes my days at work were like that. You came home exhausted. And you got to come home and sit down on your favorite couch and just relax, or your favorite easy chair. and you can relax because the day was done. But if you sat down while you were at work, you were sure to get reprimanded. You were sure to be told, you can't sit down right now, your work's not done. Well, Jesus at the right hand of God shows that he's seated and his work is complete. What he came to do as high priest, he got all the work done, and now he is able to sit down because his work is completed. But it also says in this context, in verse 3, for every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, so it is necessary that this high priest also have something to offer. Those priests before, they offered sacrifices. They offered different gifts as well. They had all kinds of different sacrifices. I believe 6 of incense, animals, wheat, oil, etc. They had things that they offered. And they offered these animals as forgiveness offerings. As we have done wrong, God, here is our offering. Well, Jesus made an offering as well. And if we look at the end of all 4 of the Gospels, we see that Jesus did not come to the altar with a perfect lamb or with an unblemished lamb laying it upon an altar and sacrificing that lamb. No. He went to the altar himself and allowed himself to be sacrificed for this offering. And that's why he is the great high priest. But we also see in verse 2 that he is a minister. Read with me, verse 2. A minister in the sanctuary and in the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, not man. He's a minister. He serves in the sanctuary. Now, when we think back to the Old Testament, back to the tabernacle itself, that sanctuary, that tabernacle, is the most holy place. The one where Aaron would go in once a year, and he would come in with his offering, and he would be right there with God. He could speak to God right there. Jesus did this at the true tabernacle. And the word true meaning genuine, real, true. It's talking about heaven. And because what we have in heaven is exact replica of what we have here. But it's not exact as in the same glory and the same rank of it, but no, it's like a copy or a shadow down here. But Jesus went in the true one. Well, we're going to talk about these copies and these shadows in just a minute. But Jesus ministered in the true tabernacle, which was created by God, prepared by God. Moses built the first tabernacle, him and the Israelites around him. But God has prepared the heaven, where Jesus went and offered his blood so that our sins could be forgiven. But Jesus, along with this, why he's the main point is that he's the mediator as well. Verse 6, but now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. The word mediator, what's that mean? Well, the idea is one who mediates between two parties. Two parties to remove a disagreement and so they can reach a common goal. So here's God over here. Pure, holy, sinless. And then we have man, covered with sin, rebelling against God. There is a gulf fixed in between that is you cannot pass it. It's impossible to. Because God and sin just don't mix. But then we have the mediator come along. And we see because he ministered in the true tabernacle, because he offered himself, he is able to stand between and touch both sides because he is God. But he is also man, is that he came into the world and he saw what we go through. He felt the same things that we feel. And as a mediator, he can stand in between and give us a chance to come over to God at the final day. That he is the bridge. And he's the bridge right now of a better covenant built on better promises. the better promises we're going to look at down in verse 10 and 11 and even 12. And then there's the better covenant, which is all surrounding, that we're going to look at as well. But first, let's look at this old covenant. Let's look at this one that is going away right now. This old covenant, start with me on verse 5, or excuse me, verse 4. Now, if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are those who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle. For, see, he says, that you make it all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. Copies and shadows. God directed Moses, do it exactly like I say. He built him, set him up a blueprint. Said, okay, Moses, this is how big it's going to be. This is what you use. These are the ornaments, or this are the pieces of furniture that you put in there. This is how you make those things. Why did God do that? Because he was having Moses create something and build something that was a replica of what we're going to go to, of what Jesus went into and where God lives. It's a heavenly tabernacle. And he wanted it to be a shadow. And so he had to build it to certain specifications. So what was before is not the complete thing. It could never be, because it's just a copy and a shadow. You can't touch a shadow, can you? How useful is your shadow when you're walking along? It just follows you around. You move around, it moves around, but you can't do anything with it. You cannot pick it up, take it with you. It is just there. And that shadow that was before, as we're going to see in a little bit, is fading away right now. But also when we look at this old covenant, in verse 9 it says that those who had it, they didn't obey. God provided them with something that they could use. Something that God said, I want you to do as I've directed you. And they just didn't do it. I have the image of God. Well, you know, whenever a child is with his father or with an adult, if they've got a hold of their dad's hand, they're safe. They're protected. Say you go somewhere that's kind of dangerous, Walmart parking lot, when there's people, I don't know what they're doing there. They're driving, texting, eating a hamburger, and looking out behind them at the same time. And you want to make sure that your child's safe around there. So you hold on to their hand to make sure they don't run out there in front of a vehicle. Make sure they don't get hit by a car. And you hold out your hand, you hold on to their hand. This is what God was doing. God knew all the dangers of the world around them. He knew that the gods around them, or the people around them, were worshiping false gods, and that they might get caught up in there. So he had his hand out holding their hand. God held their hand like a father. And all they had to do was just keep a hold of his hand, but they let go of it. And they kept letting go, and they kept letting go, and letting go, rebelling. They didn't obey what God had given them. So he said, okay, that's enough. I'm tired of this. And because of all this, down in verse 13, when he said a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete. But whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. At this time, the writer of Hebrews is writing to those who want